Hi, I'm Ann V. Brady, and I will be reading an excerpt from Chapter 10 of my book, A New Beginning, The Story of My Adoption, Life, and Service, illustrated by Eric C. Brady. Chapter 10. On our flight changeover in Los Angeles, we changed into winter clothing. When we arrived, I signed in off of leave at Fitzsimmons AMC. We stayed in the guest house until I finished processing in and we were able to find a house. We found a house in a good neighborhood. It had a park nearby with good schools. It was fenced in. I worked in the TB laboratory at the Department of Clinical Investigations. Ordinarily, TB would be located in the clinical laboratory, but the clinical laboratory director didn't want the responsibility. I was trained by a civilian boss. She was an excellent trainer. In order to make AFB smears, and culture specimens, we had to wear PPE, personal protective equipment, work in a negative pressure room under a biosafety level 3 hood. We had protocols for if we had a power outage. We would have to stop all work, leave the room, and remove all PPE. Before I started working in the TB laboratory, I had to take a TB time test. This would be used as a baseline to compare with a TB test to be performed if we're exposed to TB. We would then have to be tested again between 8 to 10 weeks. Then the lab person has to be given 3 TB antibiotics immediately. I learned all the procedures for taking smears, processing specimens, planting media, incubating, testing, and identifying mycobacteria specimens. If an AFB smear was positive, we had to rate the smear by how positive it was. We would rate it rare, small, moderate, or large. We had to call the state lab for any positive AFB smear. We had to give the patients information that the smear was positive and how positive. We had to log that we called the state lab and who we talked to and the time we called and initial it. I also learned what specimens were acceptable and which ones had to be rejected. Samples sent to the TB lab were rejected if the specimen leaked, was improperly labeled, or wrong type of specimen was sent, urine. I also had to log all specimens in the computer. Lab also worked with blood samples from HIV patients. We processed the samples, growing them in special tissue growth media for viruses. We had to add a fungicide and an antibacterial to keep the media from getting contaminated. We also had to add fresh media so the virus wouldn't die. We used the serum from the blood. Eventually, we placed the specimen in tissue growth media plus DMSO and placed it in liquid nitrogen. The samples were then sent to Fort Detrick, Maryland for research. Our colonel wanted to get rid of the TB lab and sent me over to the microbiology department to ask them to take TB. That's how I met Staff Sergeant Bradley. We became friends with him, and eventually his daughters would occasionally watch Eric and Mike when we went out for the night. As the boys got older, we would take them to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. It was a great place to take them. The museum has an interactive children's area. They can see if they can beat a cheetah's speed, among other things. Eventually, we decided to move on post, as it was too expensive living off post. We lived across the street from where I worked. It came in handy when the power went out at work. I could run over to work and put the freezers and refrigerators on standby until the power came on. I always knew when the power at work was out, as our house would lose power too. We were on the same transformer. Transformers would go out because squirrels would jump on the transformer and be electrocuted. This would cause the transformer to blow. Ed went to work for the auto shop on post. When the boys were asleep, I would go on the computer on FidoNet. I would go on a BBS or bulletin board site where I could discuss politics, games, sports with other people. Sometimes BBS sites would have games on them. finally decided it was time to search for my birth mother. I remembered my mom saying if I decided to look, she would help if she could. I called my mom. She said she wasn't sure, but she thought my birth name was Veronica Cecilia McDonald. She said she thought about keeping Cecilia and changed her mind and kept Veronica. I thanked her for keeping the name Veronica. I wasn't fond of the name Cecilia because of the Simon and Garfunkel song Cecilia. My mom did tell me I was born in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Said she didn't remember much information at the time. She just wanted to adopt me. My mom also told me that the social workers told them that my parents had died in a car accident when I was a baby. I looked up the address of the Town Hall Records building in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. I wrote a letter to the Town Hall Records and requested records pertaining to my birth. I never heard anything back from them. I decided that maybe I needed another approach. I figured that maybe an adoptee searching group could give me information on how to proceed further. I went on to one of my BBS chat groups and I asked if anybody knew of an adoptee search chat group. I was given the name of a group. I went on the BBS chat group and asked what I needed to do to find my birth mother. I told them where I was born and asked who I needed to contact for information. They told me that I needed to contact the Department of Social Services in Boston, Massachusetts for non identifying information about my birth and adoption. I could also request my original birth certificate, but it would have to be approved by a probate judge. I searched for an address for the Department of Social Services. I wrote a letter to the Department of Social Services in Boston request, requesting the form to fill out for requesting my file. When I received the paperwork, I filled it out with what I thought was my birth name, my adoptive parents' names, where I was born, and my birth date, and $30. One morning, as I was getting ready for work and the boys for school and daycare, I received a phone call. It was 7 a.m., and Ed answered the phone. He tried to tell the person on the phone that she needed to call back much later. Eventually, he handed the phone to me. I had received a phone call from a social worker from the Department of Social Services in Boston. She told me that I had my birth name wrong, that my birth name was Veronica Cecilia Pierce. She also asked me if I knew that I had a brother Robert. I thought maybe she was thinking about my brother Bob from my adoptive family was my birth brother. I told her no. She paused and said, "Wait a minute." Then I heard her say, "No, one is 8 years older and one is 4 years older." She then told me I did have a brother Bob, who was 4 years older than me. She told me she would be sending me my non ID file. I couldn't wait. When I told my mom I had a brother later that night, she said if she had known, they would have adopted him too. When I received my non ID information, I read it in entirety. I also received a letter with my file. It gave me the name of the probate judge of Middlesex County and the address of the probate court. I wrote a letter to the judge requesting my original birth certificate and mailed it. First thing I noticed in my file was that they whited out parts of dates and names. After several weeks, I received my original birth certificate. It had my birth name, Veronica Cecilia Pierce, and my birth mother's name, Helen Frances Pierce. Father's name was blank. I posted what I had on the adoptee searching chat group. I had figured out that my birth mother was born October 18th, 1919, in Somerville, Massachusetts. Someone from the group emailed me a death notice for Helen Pierce, born October 8th, 1919, in Somerville, Massachusetts. She had died February 21st, 1980, in Roxbury, Massachusetts. The person added that she hoped it wasn't who I was looking for. I thanked her. I told her that it had to be her because the likelihood that two women named Helen Pierce would be born 10 days apart in Somerville, Massachusetts was really slim. I found out a lot about my birth mother reading my file. The first part of my file was about my birth mother and my birth brother, Bob. She took care of her mother until she died. My birth mother told the social workers that her mother died of cancer in 1938. According to my birth mother, the doctor said my grandmother had died from bladder cancer. Yet my birth mother insisted that my grandmother died of cervical cancer. My birth mother decided to finish high school as she had promised her mother. She told the social worker that her aunt, Agnes Cooper, came to take care of both her and her brother John. She told the social worker that she was angry that her aunt didn't come to help her take care of her mother as she was dying, but arrived after she had died. They went to live with Agnes Cooper. After my birth mother graduated high school, she attended Holy Ghost Hospital nursing program. She became a licensed practical nurse, LPN. The pictures were labeled 1942. My birth mother went to Chicago for a nursing job. When she came back from Chicago, she was pregnant with my birth brother. She delivered my birth brother at a hospital in Dorchester, Massachusetts on April 12, 1950. She named him Robert Pierce. She kept wavering about keeping him or giving him up for adoption. She had placed him with the foster family. She visited with him occasionally, but according to the social worker, she never really bonded with him. My birth mother refused to tell the social workers who the father of my brother was. She was under pressure by her aunt to at times give him up for adoption and at other times to keep him. The social workers had problems with finding her and Aunt Agnes as they moved around a lot. My birth mother decided in January 1954 to give up Bob to be adopted by the foster family he was living with. I believe she was giving him up because she was pregnant with me. I'm going to end it there and make it a cliffhanger. And I hope everybody's having a wonderful Sunday. And peace out.